Security, remove this man from my wedding immediately. That's what my daughter Sarah said when I arrived at her wedding. My own flesh and blood. Standing there in her $28,000 Vera Wang dress, pointing at me like I was some kind of criminal. But here's what Sarah didn't know. What none of those 300 guests in their designer clothes knew. What her new husband Preston and his old money Boston family had no clue about. The man they were trying to throw out? I didn't just pay for their $2.3 million fairy tale wedding. I built the entire resort they were standing in. 500 acres of oceanfront paradise. Every marble tile, every crystal chandelier, every blade of manicured grass. All of it mine. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you are watching from. Because what happened next taught me the hardest lesson of my life about respect, family, and knowing when enough is enough. Let me paint you a picture of how they saw me that day. I pulled up to the Oceanside Grandeur Resort in my 2019 Ford F-150, 185,000 miles on the odometer. Dented tailgate from hauling construction materials. Parked between a line of Bentleys, Maseratis, and Tesla Model S cars that cost more than most people's houses. I was wearing my $45 Walmart button-down shirt, $25 Kmart slacks, $30 Target shoes that I'd polished until they almost looked decent. My hands were clean, but you could still see the calluses. 58 years of swinging hammers and mixing concrete will do that to you. Meanwhile, Sarah's wedding flowers alone cost $50,000. White orchids flown in from Thailand. The cake, $8,500 for 7 tiers. The photographer charged $25,000 just to capture the magic. I walked through those marble doors past 8 security guards making $200 an hour each, past crystal chandeliers worth $180,000 apiece. There were 6 of them hanging in that ballroom. The guests looked at me like I'd tracked mud on their Persian rugs. Women in designer gowns worth more than my truck. Men wearing watches that cost $85,000. Preston's Patek Philippe caught the light every time he raised his champagne glass. But here's the thing that really got to me. The thing that made my chest tight and my throat burn. I paid for all of it. Every single dollar. The venue, the flowers, the cake, the champagne that cost $400 a bottle. Sarah's dress. Preston's custom tuxedo. The quartet playing classical music in the corner. Even the security guards who were about to escort me out. 2 weeks earlier, I'd written a check for $2.3 million. Cleaned out one of my smaller accounts to make my little girl's dream come true. Because that's what fathers do, right? We sacrifice. We provide. We make sure our children have everything we never did. But apparently, paying for paradise wasn't enough to earn me a seat at the table. The first sign I wasn't welcome? My name wasn't on the guest list. The woman at the check-in table, all smiles and politeness, kept scanning her tablet, looking confused. "I'm sorry, sir, but I don't see a Jack Miller on our list. Are you perhaps a vendor?" A vendor, like I was there to fix the plumbing. The second sign? My invitation had my name crossed out in black Sharpie. Sarah had mailed it to my apartment with a handwritten note. "Dad, I think it's better if you don't come. Preston's family values tradition and proper presentation. I hope you understand." Proper presentation. I understood, all right. I understood that my daughter was ashamed of the man who raised her, ashamed of the calloused hands that had worked 18-hour days to pay for her college tuition, $350,000 for law school, another $280,000 for her mother's cancer treatments before we lost her. Sarah wanted a fairy tale wedding, and blue-collar fathers don't fit the script. But I came anyway, because 12 years ago, when my wife Linda was dying in that hospital bed, she made me promise something. Take care of our girl, Jack, no matter what, even when she breaks your heart. I'd kept that promise through Sarah's teenage years when she started calling me embarrassing. Through college when she'd introduce me as my father who works in construction, like it was something shameful. Through law school when she stopped inviting me to graduation ceremonies because her friends' parents were doctors and lawyers and CEOs. I kept showing up because that's what love looks like sometimes. It shows up even when it's not wanted. But as I stood there in that marble foyer, watching 300 people in $1,000 outfits stare at me like I was something that crawled out of a drain, I wondered if love was supposed to have limits. I was about to find out. Standing in that lobby, surrounded by whispers and stares, I felt something I hadn't felt since Linda died. Complete and utter loneliness. But it wasn't just about me anymore. If I walked away, if I let Sarah erase me from her life like I never existed, what message was I sending? That disrespect was acceptable as long as it came wrapped in a pretty bow? That money without acknowledgement was enough? Let me tell you what was really at stake here. This wasn't just about a wedding invitation. This was about 29 years of unconditional love being thrown back in my face. This was about my daughter choosing social status over the man who sacrificed everything to give her that status. You want numbers? I'll give you numbers. When Sarah was born, I was making $32,000 a year as a construction foreman. I started Miller Construction in our garage with a $2,000 loan and a pickup truck. Worked 7 days a week, sometimes sleeping in the truck between job sites. By the time Sarah was 5, we were building custom homes. When she was 10, we landed our first commercial contract. When she was 15, we broke ground on our first resort. Every dollar I made went into her future. Private school tuition, $45,000 a year for 8 years. Stanford University, $68,000 a year for 4 years. Stanford Law, $75,000 a year for 3 years. Medical bills when Linda got sick, $280,000. I mortgaged 3 properties to pay for experimental treatments. Sold my personal car collection, vintage Mustangs I'd restored with my own hands, to afford the best oncologist money could buy. When Linda died, Sarah was 22 and fresh out of law school. I gave her a trust fund worth $5 million so she'd never have to worry about money, never have to work construction jobs in the blazing sun or crawl under houses fixing foundations. But somewhere along the way, she started believing she'd earned it all herself. Her law firm bio, I looked it up online, reads, Sarah Miller Ashford graduated summa cum laude from Stanford Law and built her career through dedication and natural talent. No mention of the construction worker father who made it all possible. Her social media posts about self-made success and earning everything through hard work made my stomach turn. 300,000 followers hanging on every word about her journey from humble beginnings. Humble beginnings, like I was some kind of obstacle she'd overcome. But here's what really kept me awake at night. Here's what made me realize I had to draw a line somewhere. Preston's family owns Ashford Development. Old Boston money, 5 generations of real estate empire. They build luxury condos and office complexes across New England. And for the past 3 years, guess who's been their primary contractor? Miller Construction. We'd built 60% of their projects, $200 million in contracts. Preston's trust fund? It was funded partly by profits from buildings my crews had constructed. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a bulldozer. Sarah was marrying into a family that had gotten rich off my company's work, while simultaneously being ashamed that her father was just a construction worker. If I walked away from that wedding, if I let her rewrite history and pretend I didn't exist, what happened to the next family gathering? The next milestone? Would she introduce her future children to Grandpa Jack, who we don't talk about? I thought about Linda's promise. Take care of our girl, no matter what. But Linda never saw what Sarah became. She never saw her daughter choose appearance over authenticity. Never saw her trade family loyalty for social climbing. Maybe taking care of Sarah meant teaching her a lesson about respect. Maybe love without boundaries wasn't love at all. It was enabling. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the photos Sarah had posted preparing for this day. Dress fittings at exclusive boutiques, champagne tastings at 5-star hotels, planning sessions with celebrity wedding coordinators. In 200 photos documenting her perfect engagement, there wasn't a single picture of her father. But there were plenty of shots of the venues we were considering, the venues I owned, the venues my money had built, She'd erased me from her story while living inside the world I'd created for her. That's when I realized something important. This wasn't about crashing a wedding or making a scene. This was about a moment of truth that had been building for years. A reckoning between the narrative Sarah wanted to tell about her life and the reality of who had made that life possible. I looked around at those marble walls, those crystal chandeliers, those perfectly manicured gardens visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Every inch of this place had my fingerprints on it, literally. I'd been here when they poured the foundation, when they hung the chandeliers, when they planted every tree in that garden. Sarah could cross my name off the guest list, but she couldn't cross me out of the building itself. Time to remind her of that fact. "Excuse me, sir." The woman at the reception desk was back, this time with backup. A security guard built like a linebacker stood beside her, arms crossed. "I'm going to need you to step outside." I didn't move, just looked at her name tag. Maria Rodriguez, wedding coordinator. Interesting. "Maria," I said calmly, "how long have you been working at Oceanside Grandeur?" She blinked, clearly not expecting conversation. 3 years, sir, but that's not 3 years. I nodded. "Then you were here when we renovated the East Wing. Remember the contractor issues we had with the marble installation?" Her expression shifted, confusion replacing authority. "Sir, I think there's been a misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding." I pulled out my wallet, removed a business card. Simple white stock, black lettering. Jack Miller, CEO, Miller Construction. She took the card with trembling fingers. "Read it twice." Her face went pale. "Oh my God. Mr. Miller, I didn't recognize you in..." She gestured vaguely at my outfit. "In work clothes?" I kept my voice level. "That's what I wear when I'm not in board meetings." The security guard looked between us, confused. "Ma'am, should I..." "Maria." Sarah's voice cut through the air like a blade. She appeared in a cloud of white silk and fury, Preston trailing behind her. "What's the holdup? Why is this man still here?" "Sarah," I said quietly, "you look beautiful." "Don't." She pointed a manicured finger at me. "Don't call me that. And don't pretend you belong here." Preston stepped forward, all prep school confidence and inherited arrogance. "Sir, I think there's been a mistake. This is a private event." "Preston Ashford III," I said, extending my hand. "I've heard so much about you." He shook it automatically, confused by my calm tone. "I'm sorry. Do we know each other?" "Your family's business, Ashford Development. I'm Jack Miller, Miller Construction." The color drained from his face. Behind him, Sarah's expression shifted from anger to something that looked like panic. "You know," I continued conversationally, "we've done excellent work for your family. The Harbor Point condos, the financial district office complex, that new luxury hotel in Cambridge, 200 million in contracts over 3 years." "Dad, stop!" Sarah's voice was sharp, desperate. "Just stop and leave." "Stop what? Having a conversation with my future son-in-law about business?" A small crowd was gathering, wedding guests pretending to admire the flower arrangements while straining to listen. I could see them whispering, phones coming out. Social media was about to get very interesting. Preston's father appeared, Harrison Ashford Jr., silver-haired and imperious. "What's going on here?" "Harry," I nodded respectfully. "Good to see you again." Harrison's eyes narrowed. "I'm sorry, have we met?" "Construction meeting last month. Harbor Point project. We discussed the timeline for the penthouse renovations." Recognition dawned slowly, followed by something that looked like mortification. "Mr. Miller, this is quite unexpected." "What's unexpected?" Sarah interjected, voice rising. "Is my father showing up where he wasn't invited? In clothes that..." She gestured at my outfit with disgust. "Look at him. Look how he's dressed." A collective intake of breath from the gathered crowd. Even by rich people standards, that was cold. "Sarah Elizabeth Miller." My voice stayed level, but something in my tone made everyone go quiet. "Your mother named you after her grandmother, a woman who cleaned houses to put herself through nursing school. She'd be proud of your dress, not so proud of your words." "Don't bring Mom into this," Sarah hissed. She'd understand why I can't have you here embarrassing me in front of... Embarrassing you? I cut her off. The man who paid for this wedding is embarrassing you? The crowd went dead silent. Preston looked like he'd been slapped. Harrison's face cycled through confusion, realization, and then something approaching horror. You didn't pay for anything, Sarah shot back, but her voice lacked conviction. Preston's family covered the costs. The Ashfords arranged everything. Really? I pulled out my phone, scrolled to my banking app. Should I read the transaction history out loud? Or would you prefer to tell your guests yourself how much dear old Dad contributed to this fairy tale? Put that away, she whispered urgently. $2.3 million, I announced to the growing crowd. Transferred from Miller Construction corporate account to Oceanside Grandeur Resort. Payment for one Sarah Miller wedding reception, including venue, catering, flowers, music, photography, and accommodations for out-of-town guests. The gasps were audible now. Phones were definitely recording. Preston looked like he might be sick. But here's the interesting part, I continued. My name isn't on the guest list. Apparently, being the walking ATM doesn't qualify you for a seat at the table. Dad, please, Sarah begged, all pretense of anger gone. You're making a scene. No, sweetheart. You made the scene when you decided your father wasn't good enough for your special day. I'm just providing the facts. Harrison stepped forward, looking embarrassed. Mr. Miller, I had no idea. If we'd known what? That the construction worker actually owns the construction company? That the man in Walmart clothes can afford to drop $2 million on a wedding without breaking a sweat? I looked around at the faces watching us, some shocked, some confused. A few looking guilty. They'd probably dismiss me as help or a wedding crasher when I walked in. Here's what you all need to understand, I said, voice carrying across the marble foyer. Respect isn't about what you wear. It's about what you build, what you sacrifice, what you give to the people you love. I looked directly at Sarah, even when they don't deserve it. The crowd was getting larger. Wedding guests abandoning their cocktails to witness what was clearly becoming the event of the day. I could see them texting frantically, probably updating their social media followers about the drama at the Ashford wedding. But something interesting was happening. The resort staff, the waiters, the maintenance crew, the valet attendants, they were looking at me differently than the guests were. Mr. Miller? A young man in a server's uniform approached hesitantly. I'm Carlos. I worked on the kitchen renovation last year. My crew installed the new ventilation system. Sarah's face went white. What are you talking about? Carlos looked confused. Ma'am, Mr. Miller's company built this entire resort. We've been working with Miller Construction for 5 years. They designed the whole... That's enough, Carlos, I said quietly. You should get back to work. He nodded and melted back into the crowd, but the damage was done. I could see the wheels turning in people's heads, the questions forming. Preston grabbed his father's arm. Dad, is it true? Did Miller Construction build the Harbor Point condos? Harrison nodded slowly, looking like he'd aged 10 years in the past 5 minutes. Yes, and the financial district complex, and the Cambridge Hotel. Mr. Miller's company has been our primary contractor for most of our major projects. But that means... Preston's voice trailed off as the implications hit him. That means, I said helpfully, your trust fund has been partially funded by my company's work. Small world, isn't it? Sarah was looking around desperately, like she was searching for an escape route. This is ridiculous. Dad, you're a construction worker. You swing hammers and pour concrete. You don't own... The property deed is in my office safe, I interrupted, along with the construction permits, the environmental impact studies, and the original architectural plans, all bearing my signature as the project developer. Maria, the wedding coordinator, was staring at me with something approaching awe. Sir, I had no idea. When the booking came through Ashford Development, we assumed they were the client. But if you're the actual owner... She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. Everyone could do the math. Sarah had booked her father's resort for her wedding while simultaneously banning her father from attending. Dad? Sarah's voice was small now, almost childlike. You never said you owned. You never asked. I straightened my Walmart shirt. You were too busy being embarrassed by what I do for a living to learn what I've actually accomplished. And an older woman in Chanel approached us. I recognized her from the society pages. Patricia Ashford, Preston's grandmother and family matriarch. She moved with the kind of authority that comes from having your name on hospital wings and museum galleries. "Mr. Miller," she said, extending a jeweled hand. "Patricia Ashford. I believe we have some business connections to discuss." "Mrs. Ashford." I shook her hand respectfully. "Your family has always been professional to work with. The pleasure is ours. Your company's craftsmanship is exceptional. The Heritage Tower project exceeded every expectation." She paused, looking around the magnificent lobby. "Is it true that you developed this property?" "Yes, ma'am. Miller Construction broke ground in 2019. Took 3 years to complete." She nodded approvingly. "Extraordinary work. The attention to detail is remarkable." Sarah looked like she was watching her carefully constructed world collapse in real time. The narrative she'd built, successful self-made lawyer marrying into old money, was crumbling as people realized her embarrassing blue-collar father was actually wealthier than most of the wedding guests. "But I don't understand," Preston said, looking genuinely confused. "If you own all this, why do you work construction jobs?" "Because I am a construction worker," I said simply. "That's not a costume I put on. It's who I am. The money doesn't change that." I looked around at the crowd, then back at Sarah. "Your mother understood that. She fell in love with a man who built things with his hands. She never asked me to pretend to be something I wasn't." "Dad, Sarah started, but I held up a hand. "We're not done here, sweetheart. Not by a long shot." Because I could see something else developing. A situation that was about to make this very interesting indeed. Section 6, Escalation 2, 1,200 words. The cocktail hour was supposed to be elegant mingling, but it had turned into something closer to a public spectacle. Wedding guests were openly staring now, no longer pretending to be polite. Phones were recording everything. Sarah pulled Preston aside, speaking in urgent whispers, but her voice carried in the marble-walled space. "This is a disaster," she hissed. "Make him leave. Your family has security connections. Call someone." Preston looked torn between family loyalty and the growing realization that he'd severely underestimated his future father-in-law. "Sarah, honey, maybe we should just—" "No!" Her voice turned sharp. "I will not have my wedding ruined by his attention-seeking drama. Look at him, standing there in those clothes, embarrassing us in front of everyone who matters." That's when Harrison stepped in with the kind of casual cruelty that old money does best. "Mr. Miller," he said, voice dripping with condescension, "perhaps you'd be more comfortable at the staff entrance. I'm sure there's a workers' dining area where you could—" "Harry!" Patricia Ashford's voice cut through the air like broken glass. "Stop talking." But Harrison was on a roll, playing to the crowd of society people who were watching this unfold like it was dinner theater. "Look, I respect what you do, honest work, building things, but this is a sophisticated social event. Perhaps you could change into something more appropriate? A rental tuxedo? We could have someone pick something up for you." The crowd tittered. Actual laughter at the construction worker who had the audacity to show up in work clothes to a fancy wedding. Sarah's face lit up with relief. "Yes, perfect. Dad, there's a men's warehouse 20 minutes away. You could get a proper tuxedo and come back looking presentable." "Presentable," I repeated slowly. "You know what I mean." Sarah was gaining confidence, feeding off the crowd's energy. "This is high society, Dad. There are standards, expectations. People here include state senators, federal judges, Fortune 500 CEOs. You can't just show up looking like you're about to fix someone's plumbing." More laughter from the crowd. I could see people recording with their phones, probably planning to post this on their social media accounts. "OMG, wedding crashed by bride's construction worker father." Preston's cousin, some thin, pale kid in a custom tuxedo, piped up. "Honestly, I thought he was the help when he walked in. I almost asked him to bring me another champagne." The crowd erupted in actual laughter now. Cruel, dismissive laughter. "Right?" Sarah was getting animated, playing to the audience. "That's exactly what I was afraid of. My own father getting mistaken for the catering staff at my wedding. Do you see why I couldn't have him here? And she gestured at me like I was a museum exhibit. Look at those hands. Look at those clothes. This is supposed to be the most elegant day of my life, and he shows up looking like he's about to lay tile in someone's bathroom. The wedding photographer was getting all of this on camera. Maria, the wedding coordinator, looked mortified but didn't intervene. The security guards stood by uncertainly, not sure whose authority to follow. You know what the real problem is? Harrison continued, warming to his theme. Working class people don't understand boundaries. They think paying for something gives them the right to disrupt sophisticated gatherings. Money doesn't buy class. Exactly. Sarah was nodding eagerly. Just because you can afford to write a check doesn't mean you belong at the table. There's a difference between having money and having breeding. Preston looked uncomfortable but didn't contradict his family or his bride. His silence spoke volumes. Breeding, I said quietly. That's an interesting word choice. You know what I mean, Sarah shot back. Education, refinement, cultural sophistication, the ability to move in elevated social circles without embarrassing yourself or others. She gestured around the room. Everyone here went to Ivy League schools. They own art collections, serve on charity boards, vacation in the Hamptons. They speak the language of success. You speak the language of construction sites. The crowd was eating this up. I could see people filming with professional-looking cameras now. This was going to be all over social media within hours. Entitled construction worker crashes daughter's high society wedding. The man literally showed up in Walmart clothes, Preston's cousin added helpfully, to a $2 million wedding at one of California's most exclusive resorts. Read the room, dude. $2.3 million, I corrected quietly. What? Sarah looked confused. The wedding cost $2.3 million, not $2 million. If you're going to discuss the price tag, at least get the numbers right. Harrison laughed. Well, accuracy is important in construction work, I suppose. Measuring twice, cutting once, and all that blue-collar wisdom. The crowd was in full laugh mode now. Even some of the resort staff were smirking. I was the entertainment, the spectacle. The cautionary tale about what happens when working-class people get ideas above their station. Sarah was glowing with vindication. This is exactly why I didn't want him here. He doesn't understand that some events require sophistication, refinement, the ability to conduct yourself with dignity in elite company. Speaking of dignity, I said, voice still calm, and conducting yourself in elite company. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. Not to show them my bank account this time, something else entirely. There's something you all should probably know about this elite company you're so proud of being part of. Sarah's expression shifted from triumph to concern. Dad, what are you... See, when you own a construction company, you end up with a lot of interesting business relationships. Government contracts, building permits, safety inspections. You hear things. You learn things. The laughter was dying down. People were starting to look nervous. You meet a lot of people in this business. Contractors, subcontractors, city officials, federal inspectors. People who know where the bodies are buried. Sometimes literally. I looked around the room, making eye contact with specific guests. For instance, I know why Senator Blackwood's yacht purchase had to be structured through 3 different shell companies. I know about Judge Morrison's interesting real estate transactions in the Cayman Islands. I know exactly how Ashford Development has been avoiding environmental regulations on their coastal projects. The room went dead silent. Dad, Sarah whispered, all bravado gone. Stop. But the most interesting thing I know, I continued, is that in about 15 minutes there's going to be a very important phone call. A call that's going to require verification of property ownership for this resort. I smiled for the first time since arriving. That should be fun. The phone rang at exactly 6:00 p.m. Maria's phone, to be precise, the resort's main line. She answered with shaking hands while 300 wedding guests watched in dead silence. Oceanside Grandeur Resort, this is Maria. She listened for a moment, her face going pale. Yes, sir. Right away, sir. She hung up and looked around the room with the expression of someone who just realized she was standing in a minefield. Mr. Miller? Her voice barely above a whisper. That was the Federal Bureau of Investigation. They need to speak with the property owner immediately. Something about a federal investigation into offshore money laundering operations. The silence that followed was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop on that marble floor. Sarah's face went from confusion to horror to something approaching panic. What does that have to do with me? I finished calmly. Well, sweetheart, it has everything to do with me, because I'm the property owner they need to speak with. I looked around the room at 300 faces that had gone from smug superiority to dawning comprehension to outright fear. You see, when you own a resort like this, you get all sorts of interesting guests. People who like to hold private meetings in your conference rooms. People who think remote coastal locations are perfect for conducting business that shouldn't be conducted. People who pay premium rates for discretion. Preston's face was white as his dress shirt. Are you saying this place is under federal investigation? Not the place, I said quietly. Some of the people who use it. People who book private events and assume their conversations aren't being monitored. People who think expensive venues provide immunity from consequences. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the contacts. Found the number I was looking for. Agent Collins? Jack Miller. Yes, I'm at the property now. The wedding we discussed is in progress. I paused, looking around the room. Yes, several of the targets are present. Should I proceed with the identification process? The room erupted in whispers and panicked conversations. I could see people checking their phones, making urgent calls, looking for exits. Identification process? Harrison's voice cracked. What identification process? I ended the call and slipped the phone back into my pocket. Well, Harry, it turns out that when the FBI needs cooperation from property owners in ongoing investigations, they sometimes ask for assistance. Surveillance cooperation, guest identification, financial record access. The blood drained from his face. You're working with the FBI? Working with them? No. Cooperating with them? Absolutely. I straightened my Walmart shirt. See, when you build a business empire worth $500 million, you attract attention from all sorts of people. Some of that attention is wonderful, like contracts with upstanding families like yours. Some of that attention is less wonderful, like money launderers who want to use your properties for their operations. I looked directly at Sarah. The FBI approached me 6 months ago. Seems several high-profile individuals have been using private events at luxury resorts to conduct financial crimes. They needed property owners willing to cooperate in gathering evidence. Evidence of what? Sarah's voice was barely audible. Money laundering, tax evasion, offshore account manipulation. The kind of crimes that carry 20-year federal prison sentences. I pulled a folder from inside my jacket, a folder I'd been carrying since I arrived. These are the surveillance authorizations, federal warrants allowing recording of conversations on this property during private events. The panic in the room was palpable now. Guests were frantically deleting things from their phones, ending calls, heading for exits. You've been recording us, Preston demanded. Not me personally, but the property has been under federal surveillance authorization for 6 months. Every conversation in every public area is fair game for federal investigators. I looked around the room with genuine sadness, including conversations about tax avoidance schemes, including discussions about moving assets to avoid federal oversight, including detailed conversations about bribing building inspectors and environmental officials. Harrison looked like he might collapse. You can't be serious. Deadly serious. I opened the folder and pulled out official-looking documents. Want to see the warrant authorizations? Want to see the list of individuals under investigation? Several guests were openly running for the exits now. Cars were starting to speed away from the valet area. But here's the beautiful irony, I continued, voice never rising above conversational level. My daughter was so ashamed of her construction worker father that she never bothered to learn what her construction worker father actually does for a living. I looked directly at Sarah. Miller Construction isn't just a construction company, sweetheart. We're the primary contractor for federal building projects across California. Courthouses, FBI field offices, federal prisons. We have security clearances that go back 15 years. We've been working with federal law enforcement on corruption investigations since 2018. The room was emptying rapidly now, but the core wedding party, Sarah, Preston, Harrison, Patricia, they couldn't leave. This was their event. their family celebration that had turned into a federal investigation. "The man you were embarrassed to be seen with," I said, voice soft but carrying clearly, "has been helping the FBI identify and prosecute financial criminals for half a decade. The hands you think are too dirty for your fancy wedding have been building the courtrooms where white-collar criminals get sentenced." Preston looked like he might throw up. "The Harbor Point Project, the financial district complex?" "Federal investigation targets," I confirmed. "Money laundering fronts. We've been gathering evidence through construction surveillance for 3 years. Every conversation your family thought was private in those buildings, every discussion about moving money offshore, every plan to avoid federal taxes, all recorded, all evidence." Sarah sank into a chair, her $2 million wedding dress pooling around her like spilled cream. "Dad, I don't understand." "I know you don't, sweetheart, because you never asked. You never wanted to know who your father really was. You just wanted him to disappear so you could pretend you built your life without help." I looked around at the nearly empty ballroom. "Well, congratulations. You got your wish. The construction worker is about to disappear. But first, he's going to finish the job the FBI hired him to do." I pulled out my phone and dialed Agent Collins back. "Collins? Jack Miller again." "Yes, the subjects are all present. Yes, we got everything on tape. No, I don't think they're going anywhere." I paused, looking at Sarah's horrified face. "In fact, I think they're about to have a very long conversation about cooperation." Agent Collins arrived with 3 other federal agents at 6:30 p.m., just as the wedding cake was supposed to be cut. Instead of celebration, they found a nearly empty ballroom and 4 very pale members of the wedding party sitting in stunned silence. "Mr. Miller," Collins nodded respectfully, "thank you for your cooperation in this operation." "My pleasure, Agent Collins." I shook his hand, aware that Sarah was staring at us like we were speaking a foreign language. "The surveillance equipment performed perfectly. We have clear recordings of several incriminating conversations from this evening." Collins looked around the abandoned reception. "I take it the guests became aware of the situation?" "Some of them figured it out. Amazing how quickly people can move when they need to." Sarah found her voice. "Dad, what is happening here?" I turned to her, and for the first time all evening my expression softened. "What's happening, sweetheart, is a lesson about respect, about assumptions, about understanding who people really are before you judge them." Agent Collins opened his briefcase and pulled out several files. "Mr. Ashford," he addressed Harrison, "we need to discuss your family's construction projects, specifically the financial structures you've been using to avoid federal oversight." Harrison's face was gray. I need to call my lawyer." "That's your right," Collins agreed. "But you should know that we have 3 years of recorded conversations. Your cooperation now could significantly affect how this proceeds." Preston looked at me with something approaching awe. "You've been working undercover for the FBI this entire time?" "Not undercover," I corrected. "Openly cooperating. There's a difference. The FBI doesn't hire construction workers as agents. They hire construction company owners as cooperative witnesses when those owners have legitimate access to places where crimes are being planned." I sat down across from Sarah, my voice gentle but firm. "When federal agents approached me 18 months ago, they explained that several high-profile individuals were using luxury properties for criminal planning sessions. They needed property owners willing to allow surveillance." "And you said yes," Sarah whispered. "I said yes, because it was the right thing to do. Because I believe criminals should face consequences regardless of how much money they have or what schools they attended." Agent Collins addressed the group. "Mr. Miller's cooperation has been instrumental in a federal investigation spanning 3 states. His company's construction projects provided access to locations where significant financial crimes were being planned and executed." "But why didn't you tell me?" Sarah's voice broke. "Why didn't you explain what you were really doing?" I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, for the first time in years. "When would I have told you? During the family dinners you stopped attending? During the phone calls you stopped returning? During the graduation ceremonies I wasn't invited to?" She flinched like I'd slapped her. "You made a choice, Sarah. You decided that your father was an embarrassment. That my work, my clothes, my background weren't good enough for your new life. You never asked what I was building. You just assumed it was beneath you. I stood up, straightening my Walmart shirt one more time. So here's what's going to happen now. Agent Collins is going to need statements from everyone who attended this wedding. Everyone who participated in recorded conversations. Everyone who might have information about the financial crimes we've been investigating. I looked directly at Harrison, including detailed information about Ashford Development's offshore accounts, including records of the bribes paid to building inspectors, including documentation of the tax avoidance schemes you discussed in my conference rooms. Harrison's hands were shaking. Jack, surely we can work something out. Our families are connected now. Sarah and Preston are married. Actually, I said quietly, they're not. Sarah's head snapped up. What do you mean? I mean, the wedding isn't legal yet. The ceremony was performed, but the marriage license hasn't been filed. In California, you have 90 days to file the paperwork before the license expires. I looked at Preston, who was staring at me with growing horror. Your family's cooperation with this federal investigation might influence whether that paperwork gets filed, or whether it gets misplaced. Are you threatening us? Preston demanded. I'm explaining consequences, I replied calmly. For 18 months, your family has been using my properties to plan financial crimes. For 18 months, you've been profiting from construction contracts while insulting the man who owns the construction company. For 18 months, my daughter has been ashamed of the father who is building the very case that's about to destroy your family's criminal empire. I pulled out a business card, not the simple Miller construction card I'd shown Maria earlier. This one was different. Heavier stock, government seal, FBI Cooperative Witness Program, I read aloud. Special Consultant, Financial Crimes Division. Sarah stared at the card like it might bite her. You're a federal consultant? For 5 years, since we started building the new federal courthouse in San Francisco, the FBI needed contractors with security clearances to help identify construction-related corruption. One thing led to another. Agent Collins packed up his files. Mr. Miller will need you to come in tomorrow for debriefing. The recordings from tonight should provide enough evidence to move forward with the indictments. Indictments? Preston's voice cracked. Financial crimes carry serious penalties, Collins said matter-of-factly, especially when they involve offshore money laundering and bribery of federal officials. We're looking at 20-year sentences for the principals. I looked around the nearly empty ballroom one more time. Crystal chandeliers I'd personally supervised installing. Marble floors my crews had laid. Windows that provided views of gardens my landscape teams had planted. Sarah, I said quietly, you wanted a wedding without your father present. Congratulations, you got exactly what you asked for. I walked toward the exit, then paused. Agent Collins will explain the cooperation process, how plea agreements work, how family connections might influence sentencing recommendations. I looked back at my daughter, or how they might not. The story broke on social media within hours. Someone at the wedding had live-streamed enough footage to piece together the basics. FBI raid at exclusive resort wedding, major financial investigation, prominent Boston family under federal indictment. By morning, it was national news. Federal investigation uncovers money laundering ring at high society wedding, read the headline in the San Francisco Chronicle. The article included photos of guests fleeing the reception, FBI agents interviewing wedding party members, and a particularly unflattering shot of Harrison being escorted to a federal building in handcuffs. Sarah called me at 6 a.m., sobbing. Dad, they're saying Preston's family could go to prison for 20 years. They're saying the wedding was some kind of federal sting operation. They're saying you've been working undercover for the FBI. I wasn't undercover, I corrected gently. I was openly cooperating. There's a difference. The media is calling it the wedding wiretap. They're saying I married into a crime family. My law firm is demanding I take immediate leave, pending a full investigation into my knowledge of my husband's family business. I sat at my kitchen table, drinking coffee from a mug that said, World's Best Dad, a Father's Day gift from Sarah when she was 12 years old, back when she was proud to have a construction worker father. What did you expect would happen? I asked quietly. I don't know. I never thought. I didn't realize. Her voice broke. Dad, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry about the wedding, about the things I said, about being ashamed of you. I was wrong. I was so wrong. Yes, I said simply. You were. The financial consequences for the Ashford family were devastating. Federal asset forfeiture meant their development company was essentially shut down overnight. Properties worth hundreds of millions of dollars were seized pending investigation. Preston's trust fund frozen. The family's primary residence under federal lien. Harrison Ashford Jr. was facing charges in 3 federal districts: money laundering, tax evasion, bribery of federal officials, and racketeering. The FBI had recordings going back 3 years documenting the systematic corruption of construction oversight, environmental permitting, and tax reporting. Preston's cooperation with federal investigators earned him a reduced sentence, but he was still looking at 5 to 7 years in federal prison. The marriage, never officially filed, was quietly annulled. Sarah was facing her own investigation of potential knowledge of family financial crimes, though my testimony about her limited involvement ultimately cleared her. The social consequences were equally brutal. The Ashford name, once synonymous with Boston high society, became a punchline. Society columnists had a field day with the wedding wiretap story. Preston's prep school friends avoided him. Country club memberships were quietly revoked. But the professional consequences hit closest to home. Sarah's law firm, prestigious, white-collar, representing exactly the kind of clients who didn't want to be associated with federal money laundering investigations, asked her to resign. Her legal career, built on connections and social networking, crumbled overnight. I can't get a job anywhere, she told me during one of our weekly phone calls. Every law firm in California knows my name now. They won't touch me with a 10-foot pole. What about public defender work? I suggested. Legal aid? Immigration law? There are lots of ways to practice law that don't depend on social connections. That's not... She stopped herself, hearing how that sounded. I mean, that's not the kind of law I was trained for. You were trained to practice law, I said firmly. The kind of law you choose to practice is up to you. It took her 6 months to find work as a public defender in Oakland. The pay was a fraction of what she'd made in corporate law. The office was a far cry from the gleaming downtown towers where she'd once worked. Her clients were poor, desperate, and couldn't afford private attorneys. I'm helping people who actually need help, she told me after her first month. Real people with real problems, not corporations trying to avoid federal oversight. How does it feel? I asked. Honest, she admitted. It feels honest. The social media fallout was intense but brief. The wedding wiretap story was viral for 2 weeks, then disappeared into the endless churn of internet content. But the legal proceedings continued for 2 years. Harrison received 22 years in federal prison. Preston received 7 years and was required to surrender all assets acquired through his family's criminal enterprise. 3 other wedding guests received sentences ranging from 5 to 15 years. Miller Construction was officially commended by the FBI for our cooperation in the investigation. Agent Collins wrote a letter of recommendation that helped us secure several major federal contracts. Our company's reputation for integrity became a selling point with legitimate clients. But the most significant consequence was personal. Dad, Sarah said during our dinner last week, I want you to meet someone. She brought him to my favorite restaurant, a working-class diner where the coffee is strong and the portions are generous. He was wearing jeans and a flannel shirt, work boots that had actually seen work. This is Miguel, she said proudly. He's a carpenter. He builds houses for families who can't afford contractors. I shook his calloused hand and saw something in Sarah's eyes I hadn't seen in years. Genuine respect for honest work. 2 years after the wedding that never was, Sarah and I meet for breakfast every Sunday at Murphy's Diner on Harbor Boulevard. It's not fancy. Vinyl booths, fluorescent lights, coffee refills that come without asking. It's the kind of place the old Sarah would have been embarrassed to be seen in. The new Sarah loves it here. Miguel proposed last night, she announced over scrambled eggs and bacon, holding up a simple gold band with a small diamond. Nothing fancy. He saved for 8 months working construction jobs. I examined the ring, clean lines, solid craftsmanship, honest materials. It's beautiful. He's a good man. He is. She smiled in a way that reminded me of the little girl who used to be proud when I taught her how to use a hammer. He knows exactly who I am and where I come from. He knows about the wedding disaster, the FBI investigation, all of it. And he loves me anyway. That's what love looks like, I said, accepting the whole person, mistakes and all. Our relationship rebuilt slowly, one conversation at a time. Sarah had to learn how to talk to her father again, not as the embarrassing secret she'd tried to hide, but as the man who'd sacrificed everything to give her opportunities. I had to learn how to trust her again, not to love her, because that never stopped, but to trust that she'd grown beyond the superficial values that had nearly destroyed our relationship. I've been thinking about Mom a lot lately, Sarah said, stirring sugar into her coffee, about what she'd think of how I treated you. Your mother believed in second chances, I said. She believed people could grow and change if they were willing to do the work. Have I done the work? Sarah asked quietly. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. The expensive designer clothes were gone, replaced by practical outfits appropriate for a public defender's salary. The perfectly styled hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. The manicured nails showed evidence of actual use. But more than the external changes, I could see something different in her eyes. Humility, respect, understanding. You've made a good start, I said. I want to make a better one. Oh, she reached across the table and took my hand, the calloused, scarred hand she'd once been ashamed of. Miguel and I want to get married next spring. Nothing fancy, justice of the peace, maybe a small reception at the community center. But Dad, she squeezed my fingers, I want you to walk me down the aisle. I want you there in your work clothes, if that's what you're comfortable in. I want everyone to know exactly who my father is and how proud I am to be Jack Miller's daughter. I felt something tight in my chest release, a knot of hurt I'd been carrying for years. I'd be honored, I said simply. There's one more thing. Sarah pulled out a folder, the kind lawyers use for important documents. Miguel and I are buying a house, a fixer-upper in East Oakland that needs a lot of work. We want to ask Miller Construction to do the renovations. You want to hire my company? I asked, surprised. We want to hire the best construction company in California, she corrected. The company that builds federal courthouses and luxury resorts with equal skill. The company that helped the FBI put financial criminals in prison. The company my father built with his own hands. She opened the folder to reveal architectural plans, permit applications, and a construction contract, all bearing the Miller Construction letterhead. Full market rate, she insisted. No family discounts. We want to pay exactly what everyone else pays for quality work. I signed the contract, but not before adding one modification. Father-daughter project rate, $0. Payment accepted in Sunday breakfasts and mutual respect. Sarah laughed, a sound I'd almost forgotten how much I missed. Deal, she said. Outside the diner, I climbed into my 2019 F-150, still dented, still reliable. Sarah got into her modest Honda Civic, practical and debt-free. We drove away in different directions, but toward the same understanding. Respect isn't inherited, earned, or bought. It's given freely between people who see each other clearly and choose love anyway. Some boundaries, once reestablished, make everything possible again. If you're watching this, thanks for coming on this journey with me. Subscribe if you haven't already, and let me know in the comments. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family members you love? How did it work out? Sometimes the hardest person to teach respect is the person you'd do anything for. But sometimes that lesson is exactly what love looks like.